Hello, Motorado World fans, and welcome back to Talking MotoGP. We've had a couple of weeks break. The summer break has hit MotoGP, but we are finally back. Paul, talking off air to you, you said it felt like a long time for you, but I must be honest, it's actually flown by for me. I can't believe that the break's over and we're back racing.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. Yeah, time certainly did fly by, but it just seems like forever that we've done a show and that anything exciting has been happening in our lives. But certainly good to be back and welcome to everyone who's tuning in.
Yeah, we've already got Brian Ritchie. He was in pole position. So thank you so much, Brian Ritchie, for being the first to tune in. Telling everyone there to get if you're in the world of YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe if you're not subscribed to the channel. If you're in Facebook, just like the page, like the post. Let's get as many likes and interaction as we possibly can. Yvonne Pretorius, always one of the first. So great. Thank you once again, Yvonne. And then Dean, Dean Lemon. He's in third place, making out the podium there. Good evening from the incredible garden route. I missed that. I miss riding that. I did that route a couple of times on some beautiful bikes and never really thought much about it. And then Jos Matthijssen from Ducati South Africa then said to me, come ride some bikes. Have you been on the garden route? And I was like, listen, I'm a superbike rider. I don't ride garden routes. I just ride race tracks. Leave me alone. And I went and rode it, and it was an absolutely beautiful thing. So,
beautiful.
Yeah, from the incredible garden route, thank you so much for tuning in. Jean Creel at work and waiting, and he's also not too far. He's just before Plet, so welcome to you. Wayne Taylor, good evening. MotoGP fans, Rob, happy birthday to your little one for yesterday. So glad the racing is back. Wayne Taylor, thank you very much. Mike Teal, who's with his grandson, Liam Townsend. So thank you so much for joining us as always. Van Erasmus, Gavin Serviston, David Callahan, Brett Lawson, Grant Farrows, Dick Crosby, James Thompson, CP Woods, Ashraf Gajar, Jacques Claassen, Gary Granger, Adam Sweeting, Ruan Dietlif, Damien Muir, David Hawes, Gavin Caldenes, and Paolo Chiacchetti already tuned in and saying hello to everyone. So thank you everyone for tuning in. It's time to sit back and dust off the cobwebs of talking about MotoGP. I've had to kind of slap myself across the face and remind that we actually do this. Paolo from Portugal. Hi, Rob. Hello, Paolo from Portugal. So, Paul, let's start off with Moto3. Great to have the racing action back, as you said. Great to see our South African connection, Rushain Moodley, back in action. Long layoff with those injuries. Good to see him back on track. Gave himself that time off, came back, and a good progressive weekend again. Something that, it's all you can really expect from someone returning from injury is get back, didn't do any silly or make any silly mistakes, and put in a couple of, put in an overall good performance, was in the battle for point scoring position, eventually finished just outside of it in 17th, but great to see Rushain Woodley back in the saddle.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. And it would be nice to hear what his dad has to say about what his recovery has been. What is he at? 90%, 95%? But certainly a great weekend. And you and I have said it time and again, and I think many people share our sentiments. When these guys have been injured, come back, finish the race. Don't do what Martin did in MotoGP. Finish the race. You don't get hurt if you finish. You might not be at your best, but if you get across the finish line, and like Rushain, 17th place, and he was certainly in the battle for that last point, he's now got off the bike better than when he got on it, because he's got, what did they race? 23 odd laps under the belt, a little bit more experience, and he brought the bike home, unlike his teammate. So, yeah, that was fantastic. I was very happy for him. And, yeah, listen, I think he's fantastic. And if I was running that team, yes, he got injured, but I'd certainly be saying to him, listen, kid, you're doing exactly what we expect of you. Keep going. And I think that's the advice they should be giving him.
Judging from the team, I got to spend a little bit of time with him at Silverstone. They definitely seem to have that mentality, a very nurturing team that have welcomed Rushain, the whole family in with open arms. So yeah, in this off break, I was really wanting to get hold of Rushain and do a one-on-one chat with him, but as I said, I've kind of blinked and the time's gone. So we'll definitely do a catch up with Rushain at some point soon, and just see how he's, from his perspective, how his first season in Moto3 is going. But certainly, as you said, sitting from the outside looking in, very proud. Talking about Moto3, the racing action, as James Thompson said, again, you just have that love relationship with Moto3. Yeah. It's just fantastic racing. What I will pull apart is a couple of things that David Munoz, again, just it's amazing the aggression that he doesn't always get away with it. Probably more often than not, he doesn't. This time he did get away with it, and it put him on the podium. But Max Quiles is someone that I want to quickly talk about. We know he's been taken under the wing of Vertical, which is Marc Marquez's kind of talent company and whatever, looking after him. And I know there's a massive talent there. From watching the Red Bull rookies, a guy like Marc Marquez doesn't pick you out of the massive crop that's available of young riders and really take you under your wing. But I've seen a couple of instances so far this year where, the race hasn't gone his way. He's a very aggressive out there kind of rider, very Marc Marquez-esque when he was younger. But I saw it again now. He comes back into the pits and a little bit of, throwing toys out of cots and stuff. Definitely Marc needs to just grab the youngster. Made a couple of, he is a rookie at the end of the day, but he made a couple of racecraft mistakes that could have been avoided, that really, and it's not the first time this season, a couple of times this season he's missed out on the podium because of little errors. I think, just this taking over rather than, what he knows to do. So definitely a talent there, but certainly one that Mark's going to have to do a little bit more molding and sculpturing to kind of tweak out those bad areas.
Yeah, listen, Robin, that's where you get a guy like Aki Aya, who's got years of experience doing that. So he knows exactly what to tweak, how to tweak, and when to tweak. So I think Marquez will get involved, possibly not this year. He's concentrating on his own championship, but he'll have the right people. And if he can sort the light his head out, and it's definitely that the exuberance of youth. He just needs to settle down. I think next year he's going to be a problem child because he'll have a year's worth of experience and he will definitely mature. And I think then we're going to see the best of him. Obviously, this year being his rookie year, he's really been outstanding, but you're quite right. Between him and Munoz, they need to just rein that. I don't know what the right word is. It is temperament, but they go, I don't know if it's it's definitely not brain fade. It's just that they almost a desperation move that they do every now and again. They need to just temper those a little bit more, or a little bit less, I should say, at the right time. And we're going to see fantastic results from them more consistently, I think.
Yeah, him and Angel Piqueras, if anyone watched the Red Bull Rookie Cup series, they really formed this kind of Rossi Marquez kind of enemy status type thing. It really was good. I think that's kind of maturing now, and that you could see even after the race, there's a certain amount of respect there, which is great. I think the biggest problem with all these youngsters is, and Marc Marquez said it in that Red Bull Rookies thing, is that we've all been hyped about Max Quiles and Angel Piqueras. We've all been told about these kids. They're the next. And I think that's the one hard thing, especially if you're a Spanish fast youngster like Quiles, Piqueras. Before your journeys even really started, you get labeled with these big labels. Yeah. Max Quiles is the next Marc Marquez. God, imagine being 15, 16 years old and having that label. And Marc Marquez said it himself. The biggest thing is not to put these kids under so much pressure. It's very hard coming from Spain because the Spanish, this is what they live for. It's football and bike racing. So there's a lot of pressure on them. And I think Quiles, you see with some of the things he does on track and afterwards, as Byron Nettling says here, you could see with his reaction after the race, he lives that sometimes, and he's taking all that on board. So exactly what you said, I think it's just a case of, Marquez isn't in the position to be sitting with him in his box every 2 seconds to really help iron that out. But it's certainly something behind the scenes. I've no doubt that Marc and his team will be working on, but I can just see from the riding style that the way he rides that bike, that once he irons out those little things, God, he's going to, there's a crop of Moto3 riders that are coming through. I remember for a couple of years, you think, who's going to replace the Brad Binders, the Marks, geez, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Listen, the championship's in very good hands with some of these youngsters coming up. So the Moto3s just it's brilliant racing. It really is. And I'm glad, and I think it is a Simon Crafar thing, and I think it's a little bit more of a maturity thing as well. I think some of the penalties that were enforced in the past did kind of help settle some of these youngsters down. But it's a weird way to say it, but it's good, clean, hard, rough racing. And like the move from Munoz, it was 2 in 1, but there was a gap there. I'm glad he didn't get a penalty. I was waiting there, expecting a penalty because of the rider that he is and his past discretions and stuff. But it just shows you how Simon Crafar has really taken that role and not abused his power or anything. And he's really looking at it from a racing and rider point of view to go, you know what, this is going to happen in Moto3. There was a gap there. Rubbing's racing to an extent. I'm going to allow those kind of things. So anyway, I'm glad that we're getting to see this really good, hard, but for most part, fair racing.
Yeah, absolutely, Robin. Just going back to the topic of the Spaniards and the pressure they're under. At 16, these guys are still youngsters, no matter how you want to swing it. So not only do they need good management, I think, and we see it with most of them, their parents are heavily invested in their futures. I think it's also up to the parents, and it's not easy. We all know, at 16, that old saying, let the kids go and work when they're 16 because they know everything. To rein that in is very difficult, but you need to do it because you don't want a kid who by 18 is either burnt out or is so opinionated that nobody wants to deal with him. And that becomes a big issue. So I think on that point, and you're quite right, the Spaniards are under probably more pressure than anyone else, but they need to manage that. And by doing that, I mean, you just think of the two Japanese guys, Yamanaka and Sasaki. They just such level-headed. Yeah, they do race hard, but when you see them off the bike, and you don't want to maybe go to that extreme. They're almost like little robots. They're very calm. They're very, I don't want to say laid back. They're disciplined. And maybe a little bit of that needs to be moved to the Spanish side of A box just to get a nice balance. And I love these kids that are like with Gonzalez when he was upset because his bike broke. That's the passion. You can't dial that down. But it's once the race is over and you get into pit lane, you've had a cool down lap to let the emotions calm down a little bit. And that's the temperament they need to work on. And then also that in race, but that they get with experience, when to take that gap, when to hold back. But as you say, Rob, and what I've said on Moto3 forever, just pick a number and watch that guy. Maybe this week wasn't the greatest because at one stage there were only 4 of them racing, then obviously 2K, but it's always good racing and the future certainly looks bright.
Absolutely. On to Moto2, we also had our Darren Binder representing South Africa in that class. Good to see Daz back in action as well. 15th in the points in a weekend where he suffered with a stomach bug, so physically wasn't there. Up until the actual race day Sunday, God, it was a horrible weekend. I really did sit and think and thought, the scrolling down, to see the bottom 3 positions, to see Darren was hard. Then on, I think it was the Friday evening or the Saturday, it broke that he had the stomach bug, and you kind of like, you took it in, but you were just thinking, is this kid ever going to get a break? Can he just have a weekend where he's 100% fit, fully focused? I wonder how much this season, or how much in the last couple of seasons, he's actually been at a 100% physically, mentally, everything. And I don't think there's many times. But anyway, Darren, I thought did well, considering how bad it was up until Sunday, to dig deep and get in the points. And if I look, beating the likes of Alonso Lopez, who's, touted as a top Moto2 rider, Moto2 race winner, was touted to go to MotoGP. Looks like he's going to move to a better team for next year. Jorge Navarra, Huertes, who's the World Supersport 600 champion, who's also a top Spanish youngster. Jake Dixon, okay, we know he didn't have a good weekend. So there were some good feathers in the cap there of Darren. And after a tough weekend, still not the result that we know he should be getting and needs. But despite everything, digging deep and a World Championship point in a very tough Moto2 class is something to take home.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all know, Rob, when you've had a stomach bug, it drains you. You don't just recover instantly and, the bug stops and maybe you stop all the top and bottom going wild, but it drains you so badly. You don't just recover and say, okay, well, now I'm fine, off we go. And then to go and race 25 odd laps, the concentration, the fatigue. So, I think a very good result under the circumstances, but you're quite right. To have to scroll down to where we were seeing Darren on Friday and Saturday, not great. But once again, race brain takes over, and Darren's shown again, even under trying circumstances, he doesn't. He's got that grit that just keeps him going and going. And let's hope this coming weekend The health is good, and it's a new track for everybody. So it's a good opportunity for him to put himself towards the front of the field.
Yeah, speaking to a couple of people this side, and that's exactly saying what you were saying there. This is going to be a really good thing for Daz, and there's quite a few riders in that paddock that this could really be a good thing for, going to the track for the first time. No one really has any clear advantage other than the Ducati MotoGP boys. So let's hope that Darren has been able to get rid of this bug, and he can go in there with a clear mind, a fresh, clean slate, a reset, as we always talk about, and hopefully can pull something out the bag, because it needs to. Wayne Taylor's asking the question, have we heard anything about Darren? Someone asked earlier about Richer. I'm pretty sure Richer is secured for 2026. I remember a couple of months ago we asked the question, and Richer replied whether there was an option for the team to extend.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, it's a 1 year with an option for a second year deal.
And I think that'll definitely be extended with what we've seen. From the Darren point of view, it's not looking good, because the team look like they are going to stick with Albert Arenas, who again had a good weekend for the team. So he's really been performing for that team of late. And then Alonso Lopez was a name that's been thrown around to be the replacement rider there for Daz, but nothing is confirmed yet. I know Daz and his team will be working hard in the background to try and secure to potentially, hopefully, stay in the Moto2 World paddock. Gavin Caldenas, Daz to World Superbike. Now that would be something. I know we've spoken about it time and time again, going to World Super Sport and potentially, re-kickstarting his career, a la Bulliga and so many other riders that have been able to do it. Don't necessarily think it would be a bad thing, but time will tell. Let's wait and see. But I think first priority, as you said, Paul, get yourself fit, get yourself to Hungary this weekend, and kind of hit that reset button, start from a clean slate and try and get going. What I did worry about in Austria this weekend was on the back of Alex van der Berg's comments last time I had Bruno before the break, saying that Daz looked really good on track. The only thing that he could physically see was, Daz's bike just seemed a little bit slow. Then when I was watching Austria up until Sunday, I was like, oh, well, this kind of makes sense now. But at the same time, they're all on the same machines. They're all majority on the same chassis, majority on the same suspension and everything. So it's not a case of Daz getting a lemon, there's just something not right there. Let's hope it can make itself right this weekend.
Yeah, for sure.
On to MotoGP. Before we go on to MotoGP, just to round out Moto2, a little bit of news from Moto2. Aaron Canet, rumors been flying around that he was going to BMW World Superbike. I know that they did submit an offer to him, but exactly as Neil Hodgson and the TNT sports team kind of spoke about on the weekend, he has signed with Marc VDS, 25-year-old, so still a youngster in many terms. He's been around for ages and ages, Aaron Canet. Yeah. He really has. When they said 25, I was like, that's 2 years younger than Darren. Yeah. Signed with Marc VDS, very much a thought process of, right, he knows it's a very hard, in fact, the window or the door to MotoGP is probably firmly shut. But there's certainly an opportunity to still win a Moto2 world title. So signing with Marc VDS potentially for next year and giving himself another 2 years in the Moto2 paddock, head to World Superbikes when you're 27. That's still, in World Superbike terms, that's a newbie. That's a youngster. Yeah. If you look at the likes of Bautista and Petrucci and Ray and all those guys in their late 30s. Signed to see with Marc VDS to see Aaron Canet in Moto2 for a couple more years. He's just got to sort out. We know there's a very fast rider there. We know it. We've seen it. There is this inconsistency, though, where he can blow hot and cold. He's almost, and it's been throughout his whole career. He's been a top competitor, but he does, as he did this weekend, he goes to these race weekends. Listen, I don't know if you saw that crash he had, Paul, but
awesome.
Yes. How he walked away from that, I don't know. So that must have affected him on Sunday race. But he goes to these race weekends, these odd race weekends where he just, you've got to look down and what's he doing in 10th, And that's more than, I think, the appearance and anything to MotoGP. I think that's also a factor. More than anything, it's that inconsistency of not being able to string, the true talent together. So Anyway, he's staying in Moto 2, not going to World Superbikes for now. But I do think it's inevitable that in 2 years' time we will see him there.
Yeah, definitely. And it was quite I don't want to say a bombshell. He's not the biggest name in the world, but certainly a surprise that he's re-signed to ride Moto 2. But I got to say, that kid must be as tough as nails because, like you say, Rob, that high side that he had. And it seems like every second weekend, he has a massive crash, but he rides through it. By touch wood for some stroke of luck, he doesn't break bones. But yes, he's forever, now he'll probably go this weekend, nothing will happen. The week after, another massive crash. So he rides, I would say, half the season properly injured. So he needs to, however he's going to do it, rein that in and ride a full season uninjured. And I mean, he probably would win the World Championship, but he can't keep doing this and getting away with it. Remember years ago, we said that about Marc Marquez. He used to have some massive high sides or crashes on the Honda and he never got injured. But when he did, it was a big one. Yeah. So I just hope that doesn't happen to Canet because it's almost every weekend and big crashes. Not, Jake Dixon has a low side. Joe Roberts has a low side. Gonzalez hardly ever falls off. But Canet does it properly. And he's got to rein that in because, your luck's going to run out sooner rather than later. So I'd like to see him not do that as often. But yeah, good for him. And let's see, Mark VDS, it's a proper team. I can't remember if or when last they won a world championship. They've had some top riders and they just seem to be on the back foot in terms of getting the championship. I can't remember if they've won it or when they won it. I can't think off the top of my head. Normally you can say straight away, they won it but they also change riders regularly. For him to have a 2-year deal, well, good for him. At least it secures his future to try and win the championship.
Yeah, with a really good team. Byron Yedling asking if they're on Kalex or Boscoscuro. They switched to Boscoscuro for this season, if I'm not wrong. Mark VDS is Boscoscuro this year. Yeah. Thank you for that, Oli Moto. It is a great team. They won it with Tito Rabat many years ago, if you remember.
That's right.
They were competitive with Scott Redding, Mika Kallio. So they've always had a really competitive package.
Yeah, the Lowe's, one of the Lowe's brothers,
Sam Lowe's using World Superbike. Oli Moto saying that could be the feeder for Aaron Canet to go from the Moto 2 team to the World Superbike team alongside Sam Lowe's. So there's all those kind of connections. Anyway, great, good to see that Canet's going to be there next year. Jake Dixon looks like he's definitely going World Superbike. Looks like it's going to be Honda there. And then the two big standout names at the moment, Diego Moreira winning the race in Austria this weekend. We know the talent that's there. Went to sleep a little bit after his penalty from the Saxon ring at Brno before the break. Still recovering from an injury there. Took his double long lap penalty. Wasn't really the right. But then he comes back and shows the true talent that he's got this past weekend in Austria. Dominated the race there and won it. Now, between those two, which is Moreira and Gonzalez, those are looking the most likely to head up to MotoGP, with the two options being Pramac Yamaha and LCR Honda. Now, it kind of looked like it was more the ball in the court of Moreira for him to decide which one he wanted to go for, and then Gonzalez would fit in the place of the other one. Nothing certain yet, but as of today, it looks like Moreira is LC Honda bound. It looks like he's chosen that destination, and I think Honda will be happy for that because they're losing out on riders left, right, and center. They've lost Martin. Acosta, is out of the picture. So definitely, as we reported not so long ago, Mir and Marini in the factory team, Zarco and in the LCR team. Somkia Chantra will be booted there. And then Manuel Gonzalez is still this talk of the second Pramac rider. We know that Toprak Razgatlioglu is coming in there. Talk of Jack Miller replacing Alex Rins in the factory team, leaving a spot open there. And it looks like if Moreira does go to LCR, Manu Gonzalez will be the rider filling in there. So still plenty of musical chairs happening. But I think deservedly so, the two standout riders. I mean, Moreira has also gone to sleep a couple of rounds, but when he's on it, he's really on it. But
he's proper.
The two most deserved riders are going up.
Yeah, absolutely. And just think back, not last year, the year before, when Ducati jumped on the bandwagon and signed Firmin Aldeguer because he won, what did he win? 4 or 5 races in a row at the back end of 2023. Then last year, he didn't have a great season in Moto 2. Look what he's doing in MotoGP. So they see something. There's definitely the talent with those two. My concern about putting either one of them in Pramac with Toprak, that team now runs 2 rookies.
Yes.
So should they not? And I've had my doubts about Jack Miller. I still don't know if he should be in MotoGP at the end of this season. But if they're going to keep Jack, why not leave him in Pramac and put a rookie with Jack? So we'll have Toprak and Jack together, and then put Gonzalez, if it is him, with Quartararo in the factory. So you're splitting up the rookies. I understand the hierarchy and what's the right word? The stigma, not stigma, the title of being in a factory team. So do they do? I don't know. I was just thinking, if we've got 2 rookies in the same team, is that the way forward? I don't know. Because it could be very good. I've said it many times in the past. Put guys on the bikes like if we see Moreira on the LCR Honda. Put guys there who have no expectation. I mean, look at Ayagura at the beginning of this year. He was fantastic. No expectation. So it could work. I just think now you've got a team with 2 rookies. How do they feed off each other? Will it work? I don't know. Just a thought. It might be a fantastic thing, and they feed off each other, and they up the game for Yamaha as a collective. But I still think I would prefer to see Jack mentoring if it happens to be Toprak. I think he'd do a very good job at that, but he can do that from the factory team at the same time.
Yes. Just apologies to everyone. Apparently this is not going out to Facebook, and I don't know why, because it says you are live on Facebook, but it's not going out there. So we just have everyone tuning in from YouTube. So we'll post this link on the Facebook page for people to watch. And we'll have the problem sorted out for next week. I'm not too sure what's happened there, but it is a problem that Yamaha have got. I mean, we'll start with talking with Yamaha from Austria. I mean, it was so bad. I mean, I forget his name, but I was, doing my customary on the toilet, catching up with social media, and I think it was on TikTok of all things. And I scrolled past this post of the new Yamaha boss. I can never remember his name, the Italian guy. Anyway, and he was doing this almost apology post saying, listen, I know we've had this bad weekend at Austria. I just want to let you know that during struggles, we always lift ourselves up and we always are determined and dig deep, the normal PR stuff. And I went, for a factory, for a manufacturer as big as Yamaha, with 4 riders, 4 experienced, fast, competitive MotoGP riders, not like there's a rookie in there, making errors and stuff, to come out of that whole weekend with 1 single point with Fabio Quartararo in the Sunday race. Is shocking. It is, and he was saying, the new Michelin rear harder carcass that they brought for the Austria GP didn't suit their bike, and that, which all those kind of things. For Fabio Quartararo is not a 15th place rider. We know this, but Yamaha have got to sort themselves out. And whether they, we spoke about last year with the Lynn Jarvis needing a big shake-up. I think they kind of got that right. They've got a couple of things right this year so far with that Yamaha project. It's almost time now for that next step. Then that next step being exactly what we've spoken about a couple of times, Paul, is, out with the old and in with the new. Bring in the likes of a Moreira or a Gonzalez, fresh blood, to freshen up that thing. Alex Rins, with all due respect to Alex Rins, you've been a great servant. You've been a great competitor. My goodness, it's, week in, week out, we're seeing you. The odd great qualifying here and there because he tags on or whatever. But you're taking up a spot. Yamaha need to look at that and go, you're taking up a spot. And I'm still hearing these rumors that no, he's got a 2-year deal. He's staying there. Jack Miller could potentially go to World Superbikes or whatever. And it's like, how are you even entertaining this? How have you not already signed a Gonzalez or Moreira or I don't know, somebody, but you've got to do something, because that and Fabio Quartararo, I would love to have been a fly on the wall with Fabio Quartararo, because before this round he already came out saying, listen, it's getting to the point now where I'm getting to Marc Marquez's level where for my career I'm going to have to go somewhere else. Forget the money. I've just got to get myself on a competitive bike. God, it was abysmal. It was absolutely shocking to see Yamaha this weekend.
Well, it was quite harsh. Just to let you know, Rob, you're getting a lot of picture breakup and you're freezing quite regularly, just to let you know. I think part of the problem was that with the commentary we get, when they highlighted that the last 4 bikes on the track were the Yamahas, and did Gian Antonio's bike not caught fire, they wouldn't have got a point. and obviously Martin crashed, but he crashed, so that doesn't matter. De Gian Antonio had a mechanical. He was ahead of all of them, so he would have kept Yamaha from getting one solitary point out of 4 of their riders. And like you say, it's 4 experienced guys. The fact that they even entertaining Rins as a rider, and no disrespect to him, that injury 18 months ago at Mugello kind of finished his competitive career. He can still ride a motorbike, but he's certainly not what he was the weekend before he crashed at Mugello. So, yeah, I don't know, Rob. And I do think now's the time, time to make some big changes. They've done that on the personnel side. Can't they see, or can they see? They possibly need to do that on the rider side. They've thrown huge cash at Quartararo. I agree with you fully that he's getting to a point where he's going to walk out on them. The problem is he's a one-time MotoGP world champion. He doesn't have the bargaining power of a Marc Marquez or a Pecco Bagnaia. And where's he going to go? It's not like we've got a string of riders where he can just say, well, look how good I am. I'm going to take your bike. That's not going to be so easy for him. So I think he's kind of cooked his own goose in a way as well. But I do think he's getting to a point where that frustration is just he's going to do what he did halfway through last year. He gave up for a while, remember, and then suddenly got his mojo back. But if that happens within the next race or two, we're not going to see him back for the rest of the season in terms of his mental game. And we don't want to see that because, he's had 4 pole positions this year. That just shows that one lap speed, he's good. They just need to find whatever it is to, let him run. He's got to be able to run faster at the end of the race than what the Yamaha does at the moment.
Wayne Taylor saying Fabio will miss his prime by sitting on the rubbish bike. Oli Moto, Yamaha probably waiting until 2027 to see what happens with Toprak and maybe also Pecco, who could be available, and maybe even get a Costa too. I think that's very much what it is for Yamaha, is they're kind of playing out or doing their best to play out this current period of MotoGP with the aero and everything that's happening. Certainly, if they can't do anything next year in terms of luring other than Toprak, which is already a big feather in their cap, but if they can't get anyone else and they're stuck with a Rins or a Jack Miller and that make the best of it, 2027's got to be a massive, massive reset using Toprak to your advantage. As Olimoto says, headhunting Pecco, who we'll talk about just now, who, give him that fresh environment that he could maybe go succeed there. They've got to do something because at risk of losing Fabio Quartararo, never mind that, at risk of just never finding this competitive edge again. If you look at Honda, even they were competitive in many ways this weekend. John Mir pulled out a brilliant result in the Sunday race. Marini's been more consistent despite his injuries in it. So there's Zarco's won, on the Honda this year. So as tough as it still is for Honda, there's still positives to take and little things that they can look at and go, right, we're getting things done right, and we're going to sign Moreira, the next best young thing, the hot property of the paddock at the moment. They were talking about Martin, they were talking about Acosta. There's all this stuff. They're wanting to do things, whereas Yamaha, you just, it's, are you going to keep Rins? Yes. Are you going to keep Miller? Yes. The biggest news they've done is they've signed Toprak, which is fantastic. But it just, if you're a Yamaha fan at the moment, you can't be happy sporting your bright blue Yamaha shirt or cap at the moment, because it's not a fun story to watch at the moment, sadly. Can you? Yeah, you're there. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Rob, definitely. And it doesn't help to sign a guy like Toprak if you give him a bike that is totally uncompetitive. Then he can't show his true talent. That's when the guys get injured, because now he's riding at 110% every single lap, and mistakes are going to happen. The bike won't be able to ride at his capability, and that's putting pressure on him as a rookie. Moreira, if it happens to be him, or Gonzalez, you're putting pressure on them immediately. So they need to start producing a bike that is a little bit more capable. Honda seem to have done that. There's no doubt the Honda from 2024 to 2025 is a better package. What they've changed, how they've changed it, we can see the aero changes, but other changes have been made, and Honda also changed a heck of a lot of personnel. They seem to be going in the right direction. Yamaha, once again, and I kept saying, I think it's Lynn Jarvis is part of the problem. They still seem to be quite directionless at the moment. Whether they're focusing solely on the V4 we don't know. But if they are doing that, then they need to make a call and say, okay, we're going to put 3 or 4 oaks, which is exactly the wording that Peter Baum said.
Yeah.
Don't concentrate on the inline 4 if your project is the V4, but decide what you're doing, because it seems like Yamaha are just not sure which way they're going.
That is a big frustration also looking from the outside in. And that's one where Honda were at one stage. Remember coming up with, what was it, 7 or 8 bikes for Mark to test at the one, including with no wings on and stuff. Just that directionless, you need to find that direction and go, which, we'll get on it a bit later, which seems to have benefited KTM in many ways, listening to that interview with Aki Ayo and seeing them progress now. It's that finding a direction and being patient with it, but sticking by it and hopefully seeing the fruits and bearing the fruits of that. But before we get there, touching kind of on the Yamaha subject, I want to just switch to Pecco Bagnaia quickly and just dissect a little bit more of what's going on there. Came into Austria, had the 3-week break, came into the press conference and said, I've been watching videos of the old good me where I was winning races and winning championships, and I need to refine that again, and I feel good, and I've trained and I've done this. I love RedBull Ring. I've won here the last couple of years. I'll dominate this place. Great. This is the Pecco we need. Friday goes well. Saturday, goes well. Race pace looking good. Everything looking good. Sprint race just turns into an utter disaster from the launch, which, it's not his fault. Firmin Aldeguer had the same thing, but all you can say is you look at the difference of where the riders are at the moment. Firmin Aldeguer on the second row, spinning up exactly the same as Pecco on the front row. Firmin fights and comes through the pack and potentially could have had a podium had he not had the spin. Pecco just, was nowhere. We could see the onboard with the bike and the front head movement and that, but another one of those head scratching moments for Pecco comes in the pits. Then Sunday comes and you go, okay, let's maybe just a little fluke, bad, whatever, cool, reset. Gets the start. Pecco gets the start. You're ahead of Mark now. You're just behind Bez. Let's go. And can't make that work. And then just drops like a stone. And just didn't even seem like he had any fight in him. Pedro came past him and that was it. Then he was eventually a mobile chicane for Brad and the other guys. And you just see a guy that is just sapped of everything. A little bit of strong words afterwards, kind of, pointing the finger quite heavily now at Ducati. But I don't know. I don't know what more to say about the Pecco thing. It was great to see him kind of looking buoyed and speaking positively after the summer break. And I don't know. I don't know what to say about Pecco anymore. I know Oli Moto and there's been a lot of comments even off during the break now from a couple of people on our YouTube channel saying, Pecco is being found out. He's not the rider that everyone thought he was, now that there's more equal machinery out there. And you kind of want to dismiss that. But at the same time, as Oli Moto and a lot of guys have said over the, stats don't lie. There's more of the same Ducatis out there. So more of them on the same level playing field. And now Pecco's being found out in many ways. So I still believe there's a much better rider and a much better race package there in terms of the Pecco Ducati relationship, but for whatever reason it's not showing itself.
Yeah, Rob, I think his head is done in. So now he's convinced himself that this bike doesn't work for him, because it certainly works for number 93, who just happens to be winning the championship. It doesn't work for Pecco. What I'm not happy with it at Mugello, this is why I think it's 99% in his head. At Mugello, for those, the first 5 laps, he raced Mark and Alex as hard as he's raced anyone in his career. Here, he just, as soon as he's away from the Italian fanfare, he now gets to a track where there's not a grandstand full of Italians cheering for him, and there just seems to be no fight in him. He doesn't, nothing. I mean, look at Bezzechi. Mark passes him, he passes him back straight away. That's what we saw with Pecco and Martin last year. When Martin passed him, he passed him back immediately. And Pecco's done it in previous seasons. This year, I think Mark has done his head in. I'm not for 1 second taken away from the fact that him and this 25 bike just are not gelling. There's no doubt. But I think it's more now in his head that every problem that this bike can suffer from, he now suffers from that problem. Saturday, there was definitely something wrong, whether the tire turned on the rim, whatever, because Michelin put out a statement saying there was nothing wrong with the tire. So I don't know. But I do think now he needs to, and we said it for the summer break, go reset, get the head right. It's kind of almost done the exact opposite. And then to hear whether it's true or not, whether it's clickbait, but it's on crash.net, and they're pretty accurate, to hear Gigi D'Aligna saying, listen, now you got to pull your socks up, kind of. You know, it's a worrying thing for Bagnaia, and what you were alluding to earlier, even though it looks like you've fallen asleep on the picture, it's alluded to the fact that maybe Bagnaia is now going to start looking to go elsewhere. I would imagine he'll want to stick it out for next year, but it's certainly not looking rosy on that side of the Ducati garage.
Yeah, two things I pull from it, Pod. As Wayne Taylor says here, it just shows what the mental side does. Furman is too young and dumb to worry about what Mark is doing, just goes and blah, blah, blah. Pecco has to deal with it. Exactly what you, Oli Moto, Wayne, and a lot of people have said. It can't be easy dealing with a Marc Marquez in your garage, knowing what he's doing with the same bike that you've got that you just can't do. And I think in that racing situation, you know, when Pecco's got Mark with him, he's focused too much on that. Geez, look what he's doing with that. You know, rather than focusing on, I'm going to pass him, like a Bez was like, okay, I've got to get past this guy again. That's the kind of thought process you should have. Whereas Pecco's going, geez, I can't do that. You know, I can't do what this guy's doing. And I think Mark is just mentally bullied. And Mark hasn't done it with words. Mark's just done it with performances. You know, it's not Mark hasn't mentally abused this guy, you know, by saying things and stuff. He's just done it with results and getting the best out of this bike. Mark climbed on a tire that the VR46 guys, you know, struggled with this weekend, a harder rear tire, and it didn't work, and it doesn't work for this, and this. There's all these excuses that get thrown around, and Mark just makes them work, you know, and not just Pecco, but a lot of other riders don't make it work. So there's the mental side, but the second biggest problem is, and the great 481 is asking you, what do you think about the rumors that Pecco will test the GP24 and whatever? I don't know how much. It's a hard one. That GP25 was developed around Pecco. That should be a Pecco bike. That was a bike. Okay, the GP24 Pecco kind of, you know, and Ducati got right. We know that's the best MotoGP bike ever created. Great, it works for everyone. And then whatever Pecco and Martin, in a way, or you don't know how much they were using of Martin because he was leaving or whatever. Pecco was their boy. Whatever Pecco was translating is what Gigi would take and put in this GP25. But again, we've spoken about it before. This is the difference. When those bikes rolled out at the beginning of the year, or the first time Mark swung his leg over that bike, he kind of went, I prefer that one. And I'm going to stick with that one and just make it work. You know, it's a GP 24.8 or whatever it is, Mark's bike, you know. And for Pecco to not make that decision or not have the feeling to make that decision, it seems a bit weird, you know, whether he was just thinking, okay, well, I've dominated the last 2 years, yes, or 3 years. I didn't win last year's world title, but I was the fastest rider. I'll be fine, you know, and now getting caught with his pants down. I don't know. It's the fact that he's made the decision and he got it wrong. Is that impacting on it? Either way, as a lot of you have said, his mind's gone. His mind's absolutely gone. To try and regain it now is a tough one, especially when you know, I watched that interview after this Red Bull ring, and he went, you know, I finished 12 seconds behind or whatever it was in 8th at a track that I dominate with a guy out front doing the same lap times I did last year. Ducati have no answer for me. Now Ducati are starting to really point fingers back as well. How's that relationship going? You know, everyone's now blue-eyed boy Mark, and yay, we're winning. So what does it actually matter what Pecco's doing? We're winning, yay. Yeah, so it must be a tough environment. And the only one who can fix it, which is kind of what Gigi and them were saying, is, well, it's Pecco. The only guy that can fix it is you. If a Fermin Aldeguer can get it right, if an Alex Marquez can get it right, you've got to get it right. And who were the 3 riders that got it wrong this weekend on Ducatis? 3 Italians.
Yeah.
You know, someone pointed that out to me yesterday, and I was like, no, man, you can't read too much into that. Whatever, man, cock.
Yeah.
harder carcass rear tire, whatever it was, those kind of things you look at it and go, well, what is it? What is it?
Yeah, it's one that I don't know if there's no clear-cut answer. Definitely, it's a little bit or a lot in his head. Maybe he really is having struggles on that bike, which is quite strange. Why just him? We've said it before. He's suddenly become the fourth Ducati. Okay, the Gian Antonio for the last couple of races has been nowhere near what we expect from him or what we know that he can do. And on Sunday, obviously, he had a mechanical failure, but he wasn't setting the world alight before that happened anyway. But Pecco drifts backwards as soon as he's had a reasonably good start. So, yeah, I don't know, Rob. It's a very difficult one for Bagnaia, and it's not going to get any easier because you've seen it in the garage. And I think that's just human nature. When you've got a winner in your garage, you're attracted to him. So Gigi Dell'Igna and Tardozzi, Mark is now their god, and it's a hard thing for Pecco to swallow because last year he was the boy, and the year before, and the year before that. And now in the space of 11 or 12 races, he's kind of gone from being on the pedestal to not even having a sight of the pedestal. Because when you look at it, he's way behind Alex Marquez in the championship, who didn't have a great weekend, partly because he had a long lap penalty to serve, but he didn't have a great weekend. And if Pecco's not careful, the way Bezzechi's riding at the moment, he's going to be on him for the points in a couple of races' time. So he's not only has he got pressure from within Ducati, he's now got someone in Aprilia who's really making the best out of the opportunity that he's been given. So Pecco's problem is not just Marc Marquez and sorting out his bike. It's Alex Marquez and Bezzechi right behind him. So he's really got to, if ever he needs to dig deep, this from now going forward is when he needs to do that.
It was a strange one with Pecco on Sunday because for a while he was there. He was in third and, kind of within striking distance, not too far back. And you thought, okay, this is going to be almost a safe podium. Yeah, Pedro and Fermin and them were kind of coming. But, Pecco Bagnaia of old, if he was in that position, could hold it. You've never really seen Pecco drop off, the face of a cliff. And this one, he just dropped like a stone. He just had no confidence. He didn't fight back. He was, like I said, you look when Brad and them caught him, he was holding them up. He was running these. You could see that stiff rider on the bike, and it's just it's so weird. Anyone who had climbed in and watched MotoGP this weekend, and if you had said, you see that guy that just finished 8th, he's a 2-time world champion of the last 3 years. You would say there's no chance. There is no chance. Are you joking? He literally just looked like a rookie in many ways. That burnt his tires early on and just dropped off. So it's a pity. As Wayne Taylor says, I would like to see him kind of re-find his form. I've always thought he's a worthy world champion. I've always thought he's a great character. I do think he needs to just bully up a bit. I think he needs to just be a little bit more selfish. That gentleman phrase that Tardozzi said, you've got to just get a little bit more, got to get a little bit more angry, just cover yourself in mud and do the Rambo and just, get that fight back somehow, because at the moment you're losing the fight, and he needs to find it sooner rather than later. So whether that, what's going to happen, I think is definitely going to be in the factory team for next year. I know a couple of people are talking about a potential, him going to VR46, Frankie Morbidelli or a Digi going to Grassini, and a Fermin Aldeguer potentially going to the Ducati factory team, because apparently in Aldeguer's contract for his second year, he's guaranteed a factory bike. Now, whether he gets that, Grassini is not the factory bike team. VR46 and the factory are that team. So if that is going to come into play, then Fermin's got to either be on a VR46 bike, which I think Rossi would welcome with open arms, to be honest. But then the move to the factory team alongside Mark and put Pecco in maybe a slightly healthier environment for him to reset and find his form with VR46, might not be a bad thing. I could see a Morbidelli I could see any rider fitting into the Grassini. We'll talk about Fermin just now, but that's just, if I was a MotoGP rider, I'd be putting my hand up for a Grassini Ducati ride, because it just looks like a great environment to go and thrive. So anyway, let's see. And then of course there's the Yamaha talk. But either way, I can't see Pecco recovering with I can't see anyone recovering with a Marc Marquez. This version of Marc Marquez, especially as your teammate. It's they need someone like a Firmin that'll go in there and not be phased. And that's, we'll talk about Firmin just now. That seems to be his biggest strength. He's just not phased. He doesn't care who you are, what you are. If I've got to go through you, as he did with Pedro Acosta, I'll go through you. I don't care. So let's see how the Pecco story plays out.
Yeah, Rob, let's see how it plays out. But he certainly needs to do something. He can't carry on the way he's going. And you're quite right. It will be fantastic to see him. He should be there challenging Mark and Alex week in and week out. He should be. So he might have a bad weekend where he finishes 4th or 5th. But this story that a bad weekend for him is no points in the sprint again, and not because of a crash, and then finishing 8th, 9th, 10th in the main race on that bike just shouldn't be happening to him. I do believe he's a better rider than that, but certainly he needs to make some drastic changes, and he's running out of time, Rob. We keep saying it. We've had, 12 or 13 races. There's only 9 races left or 10 races left for the season. That's such a short time. He's certainly, barring Mark getting injured and Alex giving up, he ain't going to win the championship. So he needs to now, like we've said, concentrate on making a better Pecco. The results will come if he gets that right. But while he's concerning himself with everything else that's going on, I think he's got, I don't want to say info overload. I think he's got, Pecco doesn't know what's going on overload, and he needs to get that sorted out and then carry on. But until he makes those changes, I don't think things are going to get too much better for him.
Yeah, he's buffering and he needs a reset. And as long as you got Mark alongside you doing what he's doing, it's not going to be easy to do that. Hello to everyone in Facebook land. I managed to reset it while we were talking. It seems to be working. Sorry you've missed so much of this, but you can always go back on YouTube and watch what you have missed. But at least we sorted out the problem. Kate Anderson's going to bring us on to our next topic here. Mark's greatest strength is used tires, and he is the best on the grid with used tires. Van Erasmus here with a comment, and this surprises me because I know Van, and I know he's a big VR46 fan, but it's great to hear this because you can only but take your hat off to what Marc Marquez is doing. Marc Marquez is special. Never thought I would say, but man, he is fantastic. Actually, now a big fan. As Kate says, Kate, it's not just used tires. You can throw, especially on this Ducati now, you can throw any scenario at Mark, and I think he just sorts it out. If it's a harder tire, he was saying in the post conference with Firmin Aldeguer, that with this tire, especially on the left side, you had to ride it in a different way, and that's how Mark thinks. Okay, I've been given this tire. I can't it's not a normal tire. I've got to figure this out and do this and this and this with it. And that's what he was so impressed with Firmin, was that here was this spanner in the works thrown at him with this other tire, and he just made it work. And he was the fastest guy on used tires, and he was coming. And where Mark's the strongest in left-handers, Firmin Aldeguer was the fastest in left-handers. So he was really impressed with that. But Mark just sorts everything out. This weekend again, I think he had the one crash, or did he even? I think he had one crash.
No, I don't think he crashed at all.
He's just getting things right. Okay, qualifying. No, he did, didn't he? Qualifying. That's
he crashed in qualifying. Yeah, yes, correct.
Yeah. So qualifying doesn't go his way. So he's on the second row. Okay. Launches didn't get the launches that he wanted. He wasn't turn one and left. In that main race as well, closed on Bezzechi. Bezzechi's actually really strong, got a good pace. Cool my front tire down a bit, catch him, knows where to pass him. Just has every answer for every question thrown at him. And I mean, the guy's got 413 points or something. It's just mental, and it's crazy to think what he's doing. And we talk about this resetting careers and stuff. I saw a graph put up of this time 3 years ago on the Honda. He had 93 points or 91 points or something. Then last day he had 220 points. He's got 413 now. This was a guy that 2-3 years ago on that Prime Video documentary sat there going, I think it's time to call it. I think it's over. So in that part, and I know it can be boring. I know it can be boring watching the same guy win week in, week out. Sure, I've said it time and time again, and I will continue saying it. To watch that guy handle race weekends the way he is at the moment is just, it's spectacular. We're seeing a guy in his prime. We're seeing the Fosters, as I think it was Wayne Taylor or someone said, for a Casey Stoner to come out and say, listen, this guy is just, he's got it all figured out. He's on another level, and it's for the others to catch up. It speaks volumes in itself.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. And, there's not much you can add to it for those that are not Marquez fans, specifically those that are Marquez haters. Must be terrible to watch. But for those who are sitting on the fence, like we've said many times, just admire what this guy brings to the party. His racecraft is at the top draw. He sits behind Bezzechi. He has the wherewithal to obviously check the tire pressure, whatever reading he gets on his dash. As soon as he gets to where he thinks he's getting towards that 60% limit, he just backs off. He knows his pace. He's got such racecraft wherewithal. He's an all-encompassing rider. He doesn't just focus on beating Bezzechi when Bezzechi was ahead of him. He figures things out. He looks at the bigger picture, and I think that's what a lot of people must take out of what Mark is doing at the moment. He's racing from the first, when the robot drops from red, his brain is in race mode till he crosses the finish line at the end, where some of the other guys at a point during the race, they seem to, I don't want to say they're going to neutral. That's impossible on a MotoGP bike. But you only have to lose concentration for a split second on each lap, and you've lost the plot. He doesn't do that. He's got to that point where for whatever it is, 40 odd minutes, everything focuses around one thing: winning the race, whatever it takes, within reason. So now he's not riding at 105%. We're seeing a Marc Marquez probably at 98%. If we see Marc Marquez on the Honda, I think rode at 105% plus every race. He doesn't have to do that now. And that's a problem for everyone else at the moment. So to beat him, you're going to have to, you can't even say, oh, well, if it rains. He's good in the rain. If the weather conditions are tricky, he's good in that. So it's going to be difficult, and I don't like to see someone dominate the way he is. But you can't blame him for what he's doing at the moment. He's just best rider, best package, best thought process. As I say, for those 40 minutes, he's on it in a zone that just doesn't change. And I think that's something really special.
Don't worry, Johnny Martins. We won't turn this into the Marc Marquez show, because I agree with you. He does get enough of it everywhere else, but it's all deserved. You can't say people talk about him, because what he's doing is absolutely fantastic. Speaking of fantastic, and Oli Moto, I just want to touch upon this quickly before we get on to Bezzechi and Aprilia and how impressive that has been. Oli Moto talking about ride height devices, and yet that was a big theme this past weekend. Neil Hodgson, I love how raw and just too direct he is with it. He's like, just chuck the stuff off. But we saw Fabio Quartararo's rear ride out device leak oil onto his tire, crashed. We saw, was it
Raul Fernandez had a problem?
Continuing to show a little bit more than what we've ever seen in MotoGP from him this weekend. He was the second best Aprilia rider this weekend, but his device failed. We've seen it a couple of Jorge Martin, I think, going into turn one in the sprint race. It looked like he was trying to we've seen this too many times. Cannot wait for that stuff to go, because I do think, like Neil Hodgson said, we've seen Vinales crash a Saxon ring on the Aprilia with ride out device. We've seen Fabio Quartararo Silverstone. We've seen all these things. What is it going to take to really get noticed? 300k an hour failure and a rider in hospital with severe injury. You know what I mean? I think the time has come to kind of get rid of all that stuff. I cannot wait for 2027. I can, but I can't, because I do think it's going to be a little bit of a level in many ways. It's going to be a clean slate in many ways, and it's going to be a lot less for riders to worry about. Exactly what you were saying now, Paul. I've done it a couple of times with Brad, and I did it again this year at Silverstone with Brad, with Greg Maloney with me. And Brad takes us through what he has to do on a lap: activating ride out device, deactivating. Okay, the KTM, you brake and it deactivates, but press this button, look at your tire pressure. You know what I mean? It's like Mark, I think, has been able to do all that better than everyone else. Apart from just the riding, he's able to take everything that it is to take a MotoGP over 30 lap distance and get the best out of it. Whereas a Pecco, like I said, I think he gets to a point where now he focuses on tire pressure and maybe panics and goes, I think those kind of things and get in the way. But there's too much going on for these guys. So I cannot wait for the reset. And again, it was a big talking point this weekend, and it showed that these devices and everything, they must just be gone. It's been great in some ways seeing the technology come in and push to this kind of level and that. But it's got to a point of, listen, you keep throwing stuff at these guys, they're gonna take every single little tenth and everything out of everything. You talk about safety. This rider, it scares me. I don't know if I'd confidently be able to ride one of those bikes, wondering if that system's going to come back or if it's not. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the reset. Excuse the pun.
Rob, just a question. Are ride-out devices not gone for next year? Or is it? I thought it was next year.
I'm not too sure. I don't think. I know Neil, Moto, Wayne Taylor, anyone in the comments, let me know. I know Neil Hodgson, they were talking that they were going to have a riders kind of meeting at Austria about it. Should we ban it immediately? Is it going to be banned for next year or something? It's not as easy as just, okay, no more ride-out devices. These teams and manufacturers have spent millions on developing it. These riders they're going to have a phase-out period, because this is what they're used to. But I don't know. I honestly, 2027, they are gone. Jonathan Caldwell, Wayne Taylor, no, it's 2027. And only the front device, I think. I thought it was both devices.
Yeah, I thought the when they squat them down out the turns, I thought that was going.
Yeah, I also thought that. Come on, people, get into Google while you're watching this. I can't.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Rob, I agree with you. It's something, sometimes all the technology at a point, it gets to a point where enough is enough. Let's go back to racing normal motorbikes. I understand that's technology, and a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it filters down to the road bikes, and it's beneficial to everyone on their Panigales, on their RR BMWs, because they got launch control, traction control, but some things we don't need. So yeah, let's see what the outcome is. But I certainly think that the more we get rid of some of these things, the better it will be for the racing.
Agreed. Paul, let's talk about this great guy called Marco Bezzechi, who has always been a great guy. He's always been a talented fast rider. I've always had my doubts with him, even in his Moto 2 days. You'd blow hot and cold, and didn't really think he had that killer instinct to take it to the next level. He didn't have that Rossi pulling the move on Stoner at Laguna Seca in him, or on Gibernau at the final turn at Jerez, or he didn't have that Marco Rossi killer instinct that the real elite had, that Casey Stoner didn't really have that in him for me. And he was never really a leader. He was a guy you could put in a team, he'd be a team player, nice guy, be good for the press and the fans, and he just played the game well. And I really, that was emphasized when he snubbed the Pramac deal to stay in the VR46 team last year, because he felt comfortable there, and he was always that shy kind of kid in the corner. You were always a fan, but you were never shouting at the rooftops about Bezzechi. You never kind of put him in the same league as competing for the top 3 in the World Championship as he is now. We shared our doubts at the beginning of the year, especially when Martin was injured, that Bezzechi is going to be your go-to guy for developing this bike and being your lead rider. Good luck with that. And it didn't start fantastically, but kudos to him, and we've given him kudos. He really has taken it on, and he's really lived up to it, and he's stepped up to the plate when Aprilia's needed him. Not for the first time. Sorry, Paul. Yeah, not for the first time, but this past weekend, I saw this Bezzechi go, I am a full factory rider. I'm going to do this. I am a championship contender. I am just as good as these guys. It's a track Aprilia should not have been able to go well at. Again, the hard rear tire carcass should not have worked for Aprilia. Literally up until qualifying, it was not working. If you could give me £1 for every time you saw Aprilia in the Kittilata, I would be a very rich man by now. They just couldn't stop the bikes. They could not stop those bikes. Everything that the commentators and everyone thought was going to happen happened. So you thought, well, this is it. This Bezzechi comes out and great sprint race, and an even better main race, and is now, we spoke about it at Bruno just before the break, saying, forget Alex and Pecco in many ways. Bezzechi is becoming Marc's biggest challenger. And again, as you said, in the race for Marc to pass him, Bez to pass him back, okay, and then he just couldn't. But we're seeing this Bez that really has now taken this, I'm a factory rider, it's time to act like it. And I love the stuff he's doing behind the scenes. And I kind of Sunday night wanted to go online and buy myself a Bezzechi cap shirt, sign up to the fan club, because he really is. He's doing everything right, and he stepped up, and I must just applaud him for that. I think it's brilliant.
You're absolutely, Rob, and your sentiment is spot on. I can only imagine that at the end of last year when he signed with Aprilia, he was like, okay, they've got the world champion. I'm going to be a great number 2. I'll just do what I got to do. I'll go race the bike, and it'll be up to Martin to make sure that I've got a bike that's competitive. That I would imagine, and we're really oversimplifying it, but I think that would have been his sentiment. They would have made it quite clear to Aprilia that Martin is the number 1 rider. There's no doubt about that. Then what happened. Martin breaks every bone bar 1 in his body in the first 5 weeks of testing and racing, and Bezzechi has to step into this role. And I think what happened, the first 4 races, if I remember correctly, were not great for him. Took him a while to adjust to being the number 1 rider, and adjust in his cop to say, okay, now this big ball has been put on my back, and I've got to carry the weight of this team. And once again, I think we're over-exaggerating it, but that's certainly what happened to him. And it's taken him, probably the last 4 races, he's been brilliant. So it took him 6 races to filter into the role of being the manure in the team. They're treating him like that, and you can just see he's shining. And I think only better things to come from him. Yeah, he's probably going to have 1 or 2 weekends where the bike is not great, but he'll certainly make the most of it. And I think it's now put Martin even more on the back foot. Never mind all the injuries. Now he's got a teammate who, at the beginning of the year, his first thought was, I'll drill this out. Now suddenly he's like, geez, what do I have to do to get to Bezzechi's pace without falling off? So he's under a different kind of stress and pressure. And I think Bezzechi's just grabbed this with both hands, and he said, I'm paying you back for making me the factory rider, and now that I'm number 1, I'm going to pay you back twice as much. And I think fantastic and absolute, what you said, Rob. Last year, he kind of had a nothing year, where it was his choice to stay at the VR46, and he kind of had a nothing year. And this year, he's showing us what he's made of. And yes, it's fantastic to watch, and I really sincerely hope he's going to win another race. So, yeah, well done to him, mate.
Brilliant to see. And, touching upon that Jorge Martin comment you just made, it's easy for us to say, and we've said it, Martin's got to take this reintroduction, no testing, off the bike for so many months, injuries. He's got to kind of just, slowly ease his way back into it. It's not that simple now, because we've always said, Martin must be looking from the outside going, I've got 3-4 tenths on Bezzechi, so whatever he does, I can do better.
Yeah.
He's now, exactly what you said, he's living this going, hang on, this is not the Bezzechi that, I thought Aprilia had signed. This is now a guy that I'm really going to have to compete with. And it showed for me this weekend. One of Martin's strengths and his weakness is this refusal to lose. He just, excuse the pun, refused to lose. He just, I can imagine him wanting to go around there and just don't crash, just. And then he looks at it and goes, well, Ralph Fernandez is ahead of me. Bezzechi's miles ahead of me. He's not even just ahead of me. He's miles ahead of me. And we both started the weekend off with these troubles not getting the bike to start. He's made it better and got more competitive, and he's challenging Marc Marquez, doing faster times than I did on my Ducati in my championship winning year on the Aprilia. Yeah. And then I can picture Martin going, no, okay, bugger that. I'm going now. Which is, like I said, it's a good and a bad thing, because you want a rider to have that arrogance and that competitive nature to go bugger that. But in Martin's situation, he's got to be very careful, because it's a very fragile situation. And and the fact that he got bullied by when Alex Marquez did his long lap penalty, then he came back on, and then he ran wide the chicane, and then him and Morbidelli were there, and then he kind of got bumped out. And Martin's not used to being bullied in MotoGP.
Yeah.
He's normally the bully, so I could see all those factors adding up, and then next minute Martin's on the deck. But exactly what you're talking about now, Paul, it's kind of the reintroduction that Martin wouldn't want. If Bezzechi was just ahead of him, okay, cool, that's fine. The fact that it's like, okay, well, and it's adding pressure on Martin, because it's, okay, well, when you are at full fitness, you better perform, because the bike can't perform. Bezzechi's won on it. He's getting podiums week in, week out now. He's very soon going to be top 3 in the championship. So what's going to be your excuse after you've had 6, 7, 8 races? We cannot judge. And please, I'm not judging Martin, because it's very unfair to judge him after this small amount of time, 2 races back on the bike or whatever. But knowing the personality that Martin is, there's no doubt that that's all churning in the back of him going, yeah, I want to take it easy, but at the same time, I don't have time to take it easy, because this guy's, pushing the yardstick further and further forward.
Yeah, it's definitely something that'll be playing on his mind. There's no doubt. And like you say, that's not in his nature to say, I'm here, which we saw at Qatar. He doesn't get there and say, okay, I'm going to make sure that I just don't crash, even if I come stone last. That's not Martin. Pecco needs a little bit of this, whatever it is, gumption to say, okay, you pass me, I'll pass you back. I don't care what happens after that. Let's see. And I just think he's got to try and be, he's got to be, like you say, he's got the good and the bad. He's got to temper these two things, take a little bit here, a little bit there. But as I say, the situation he finds himself in, and it's 100% his fault, is that he's now got a teammate who when he signed the contract, he thought, I won't even see him in the races. He's now at a point where, he can't see him because his teammate is 6 bikes ahead of him. And I think it bodes very well for Aprilia, because I think Martin's natural instinct is he's a fighter. He's not going to give up. So you're not going to see a Maverick Vinales or Aleix Espargaro last year scenario where he just says, there's nothing more I can do. I'm done. I don't think we'll see that from Martin. The only thing I think that will limit him is if he has 2 or 3 big crashes again, which please don't let that happen, because we need him on the grid. It definitely adds something. You need your world champion there. Yeah. But I think he's going to have to restructure his thought pattern to get on the same level as his teammate. He's certainly going to do that. And he's got to worry about Raul Fernandez, who's really impressed me ever since Manu Gonzalez tested that bike. Yeah. Suddenly Fernandez is riding like a guy who's capable. And yes, he had a ride-out device problem in the sprint, but the main race, he was good. Look, he's an aggressive rider. Yeah. But certainly his general riding from, 6 races ago to now, he's improved dramatically. So that's another thing Martin's going to have to watch out for that. So I think it bodes well for Aprilia, because now suddenly they've got 3 guys, and Agura's there as a rookie. I think he's doing okay. But the 3 main contenders at Aprilia, exactly what we want, Rob, they're going to push each other. And I think that's going to move Aprilia closer to Ducati. So I think it bodes very well for them.
Wayne Taylor, I agree completely with that. In fairness, if Martin had a full preseason, he would be right up there, probably ahead of Bez. I fully agree with that. What that would have done to Bez, would we have seen the Bez that we've got now? Is probably also a topic of discussion. The fact is, Martin will get there. Martin is a phenomenal talent. He's a MotoGP world champion for a reason. We know that. I just think a personality like Martin is sitting there going, I know I've got to take it easy. I know I don't have enough laps on this bike. I know. But I don't want to know. And that's what clicked in the race for the crash for me. I think he was doing that. I know. And then eventually he went, bugger this, I don't know. And then he landed on his head, trying to go faster. I think you're wrong about Martin. He will jump. He wanted to jump already. I think you're wrong about Martin. Listen, the Martin Aprilia, I think that's going to, I don't know, unless something miraculous happens, I think that's going to end in 2027. I think Martin will be hot property for either Honda or Yamaha in 2027, to be honest. I think the Ducati exercise would have wiped their hands with him, and they've got more options there. But exactly what you said, Paul. I think MotoGP and the fans deserve to have the world champion at his best on that number one bike. So let's hope that we can see that sooner rather than later. He needs time on the bike. He needs laps under his belt. He needs all that. Let's hope he gets it. Hungary this weekend is going to be a good indicator of exactly where he might be.
We're definitely having connection issues.
Sorry, can you hear me now? I think it's your
it keeps disappearing, but it seems okay. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. But anyway, let's hope we can see Martin back sooner rather than later.
For sure.
Paul, I want to jump to KTM, because after the doom and gloom from the beginning of the year, the financial problems, the results, the everything, as I spoke about earlier in the show, they did an interview with Aki Ayo, and he said it was very hard. We had to be patient. But what we had to do is we had to find a direction, stick with it, and know that we had to be patient. There were going to be very bad days before we were going to see good days. Pit Bara also said it. And Pit Bara admittingly said, Aki came to me and said this to me, and I said, no, this is bullshit. And Benny Pedrosa came to Pit Bara and said, Pit, your bike is not a top 3 bike. Your bike is not a top 5 bike. Your bike is a top 7, top 8 bike. The sooner you come to terms with that, the sooner we can move on with this project. Find our direction, be patient, find a way to go forward with this project. And as frustrating as it's been up until now, it looks like that's what KTM have done, and they're starting to bear the positives and bear the fruits of all that hard work from that, being patient. We've seen at Brno, they were a lot more competitive than they've been before. And we saw now at Austria, they were a lot more competitive, especially with Enea Bastianini. Great to see Enea Bastianini competitive again. Great to see Brad with a bit more fight, looking a bit more at one with the bike. We'll dive into that in just a second. My only complaint from KTM from this weekend was where I think they missed a trick with all this momentum that's going. Maverick Viñales says, I want to ride. An injury that's going to take 4 months to heal, that the doctors have told him. So we all know, damaged ligaments in his shoulder, it's going to take 4 months. He makes the decision he wants to ride. Okay, great. I think KTM should have stepped in there and said, Maverick, especially after the first session, you're not going to do the weekend. We've got a more than capable Paul Espargaro sitting here. We need laps. We need data. We need to carry on this momentum. The fact that they let Maverick kind of do Friday, kind of do Saturday, then miss the deadline to put Paul on the bike, I scratched my head a little bit, to be honest, because they missed an opportunity to have 4 KTMs performing really well, because even Paul Espargaro would have taken advantage of the Yamaha's not really performing, the Honda's not really performing, and a couple of the Aprilias and the VR46 machines not performing, especially at a home track, like Andre Calvert says. So that was my only disappointment from KTM this weekend.
Yeah, Rob, we're definitely having connection issues. You keep freezing and disappearing. Okay, I get the gist of what you're saying. I think overall, my opinion, and I'm wondering if I'm being stupid, I think Ducati have got to a plateau. That bike doesn't seem to be improving. Everybody else is catching up. So maybe Ducati now are improving by 0.5%, and everyone else at the moment is in.
Hey, Paul, I wonder if it's your connection.
Fantastic to be able to see Brad riding like the Brad of old, but riding near the front instead of not seeing him at all. I mean, he was sideways into the turns and he looked like he was enjoying himself. The KTM definitely is a better package. We've now had 2 good weekends, Brno and this weekend. And, I think also, once again, when you get the collective working in the same direction, everybody seems to be benefiting from it. You're quite right about the story with Maverick. They should have just thrown Paul on the bike. I suppose he's a racer at heart, Maverick, and he is a big name in the sport. So if he says, listen, I want to give it a go, they gave him that opportunity.
It is Paul's cocky strain connection.
going in the right direction for a project that, like you say, they've told Pitt it's going to take time. Well, that they're very the same boat, but they don't seem to be making any boats. So I think it's good. But to me, the best thing was watching Brad sideways into the turns, whether it's the right way to ride that bike, because it's a completely different way of riding to Pedro Acosta. I don't know if it's the right way, but sheesh, it's certainly spectacular. And the commentators were saying it's magnificent to see Brad riding like the Brad of old.
Agree with you, Paul. Just all the comments coming in saying it's your connection that keeps going out. Mine seems to be okay, so I'm not sure if your Eastern connection is working there, or maybe your wife's streaming this
could be.
out of
It could be, Rob.
Well,
Probably.
Paul, I'm gonna remove you for 2 seconds. Just try and reconnect yourself and then come back. Okay. So I'm just gonna remove Paul there quickly. There we go. I'll just keep you guys entertained while Paul just resets himself there. Maybe he can just maybe it's just a cock connection that he's got there. But Paul, I think just reset yourself, maybe reset the routine, and we'll get you back on. It's winter in RSA. Paul, are you freezing? Tim Jordan. But going on that point, I was a little bit upset that KTM didn't put Paul Espargaro on the bike. I think they missed a trick to gain that data, that info. I think Paul would have been competitive. I think he would have been inside the top 10 for KTMs, potentially in the top 10 would have been great for them at their home round. So it didn't make sense to me. But when we get Paul back, we'll talk about Enea Bastianini, who I think is riding that bike. I love the fact that we're showing a lot of Enea Bastianini. I love his riding style. He's got that perfect blend of aggression and smoothness. He's got like Lorenzo and Marquez. He really does have a good blend of that. It was clear that Vinales should have withdrawn sooner. Paul could have come in earlier in the weekend. Olimoto, I fully agree. Let's bring Paul back. Let's see, is that better, Paul? No, I think he's still freezing. Can you hear us, Paul?
I can hear you clearly, Rob, but I don't know if it's your side or my side, but it's definitely not right. Something's not, and I checked my internet connection, looks fine.
Yeah.
But my wife could be streaming something that she shouldn't.
I like how politically correct you put that. So Paul, I was just saying, we touched upon Paul. They missed a trick there, but it was great seeing Enea Bastianini looking again, as he did in Brno, comfortable on the bike and looking more competitive. That just shows that there's been a big step. Forget Brad for a second and Acosta and Vinales. Enea Bastianini, that exercise alone just shows a big step that KTM have made.
Yeah, most certainly. And Bastianini's had a shocker of a year so far. And I mean, so much so that, 3-4 races ago, there was a talk that he had told KTM he's out of there, he's done, he's moving on. And suddenly things seemed to have turned a bit of a corner for him. So that's why I say, Rob, I think the whole package, exactly what Pedrosa was saying to Bahra and Akiaya, they found a direction, they've trusted that direction, and they're sticking to it. And that seems to be working. So I think generally everybody in MotoGP is up in their game, possibly with the exception of Yamaha. And I don't think Ducati are making big strides ahead again. So I think it's the rest of this year, I think it's going to be even more competitive, and it's going to be interesting to see. But certainly the KTM story seems to be, we've been saying for a long time, they try this direction, they try that direction. Maybe what they've been doing is sticking to one direction, but now everyone's sort of channeling into the same lane and they're going in the right direction.
Just reading this comment here from Wayne Taylor. Interesting what the guys were saying on the Oxley Bomb podcast regarding the rear tire overheating and why this weekend with this different tire, it was allowing Brad to ride sideways and keep grip. And it was something that I also noted was, yes, the KTM in Bastianini and Brad were better. They certainly were better. They looked better. The results were better. Was it also at the detriment of Yamaha and Honda not being able to get on with that harder rear tire carcass. I think that did benefit them as well, not having the Quattararos and then up there battling with them as well. It certainly did help Brad, whatever it was, did help Brad feel more comfortable on the bike. You could visibly see he was still sliding the bike, but it wasn't as aggressive or as loose as I've seen Brad, to be honest. I saw it go and I saw it come back in line more for Brad to attack the corner. I saw a more direct Brad. Pedro Acosta impressed me again this weekend, and it just proved that the direction of the bike is getting better, because Pedro was on rails and he could really put that bike where he wanted easier than he could before. And watching Brad, I could see that as well. He was able to make passes. He passed Raul Fernandez a couple of times on the brakes in turn 1, turn 2, and in turn 4 as well. And even when he did that, he could correct mistakes, if you know what I mean. In the past, I could see Brad making a mistake and not being able to correct it because the bike was too stubborn. I could see a Brad with his riding style that was overcompensating for a bike that was stubborn. I saw a Brad that was feeling a bit more comfortable and that could ride the bike a bit more the way that he wanted to. And I'm hoping that's because they've made a step and it wasn't just a case of, as Andre Calvert and other people say, the introduction of the stability control and this rear tire that may have just suited the KTM a bit more at this track, at a track that suits the KTMs.
Yeah, definitely. And those are very valid points. But one thing why I think KTM have certainly improved is, and I do agree with that harder carcass on the rear tire. We saw Brad riding like we saw Brad, I'm going to say 3 seasons ago. Loose, a little bit on the wild side, but totally in control, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then we saw Pedro Acosta, because very few times this season have we seen the two of them in the same shot. We saw Pedro that, I don't want to say he's ultra smooth, but he's certainly very smooth. His lines are traditional lines, for want of a better word. Turning late-ish, as you've always said, early-ish, keep the apex as short in the corner as possible, where Brad runs it a little bit wide, backs it in more than probably anyone except maybe Sheridan Moraes. So we saw the two styles, but they both looked fast and they both were fast. So maybe that means that we're getting a bike that a little bit in this direction works for Pedro, a little bit in that direction works for Brad, but the overall package, we're throwing Bastianini into the mix. It's working better for all three of them. And I think that's what we want to see. Between him and Bezzechi, they're making it look very competitive as a top 3 bike at the moment.
Time will tell this weekend in Hungary. We've said it all show long. It's kind of a level playing field. KTM's biggest handicap for a couple of years now is being able to string 2 or 3 rounds together. So they've done Brno now. They've done Red Bull Ring now. They've got to go to Hungary and let's see how that works. As Andre Calvert says here, could the stability control, the introduction of that, and basically that's just something that was available in the ECU that has now been unlocked for all the teams to work. I'm not going to even lie to you. I don't fully understand how that really changes things in terms of traction control and how it all works. I know our Zero bikes have them in, but it's just an overall package that deals with the traction control, wheelie control, everything as one rather than separately. So whether that helps the whole, anyway, either way, it was a much better showing from KTM. Let's hope they can go to Hungary now and back that up, especially our Brad, with this newfound confidence. As Wayne Taylor said, his crew chief said they found something on the front end. That could be good news. This Hungary track Bolton Park really does look like a stop and go type circuit. Sam Lowes was at the MotoGP round on the weekend, and he said he thinks the MotoGP bike's really going to struggle there because it's a very tight and kind of like niggly track. The Ducati boys have got, and this is the difference with Ducati. No, it's a new track. So what did Ducati do? Load up a bunch of Panigale V4s, special ones, right on the limit of what you're allowed to do. Production-based bike, proper suspension, right on the limit. And we're taking our 4 boys out, or our 6 boys out to the track. And they've got that advantage. While everyone else, Yamaha, Honda, KTM, No one else has been here. So this is the next advantage that Ducati have. But on a MotoGP bike is a different story. So let's wait and see if KTM can back it up. I really do hope so. But I was very impressed with Bastianini. Love watching Bastianini in full flight. It's a beautiful thing. Loved seeing Brad back on some kind of confidence, and was really impressed with Pedro Acosta and the pace that he showed. Little bit of bad news now that I'm going to kick in the teeth of, and I hope it's not true. And on Moto and all you keen watchers on this kind of thing is, Paul, I don't know if you've seen it, this news that Red Bull are going to be pulling out their sponsorship of the KTM team as of next year and potentially moving it over onto the Honda package. Now, something I heard yesterday for the first time, didn't pay much attention, and then a very good connection of mine within the MotoGP, he normally gets everything that he tells me spot on, kind of confirming that this is a rumor to be taken seriously. Makes no sense, as that Red Bull KTM connection has been there for ever and ever and ever. Austrian, Red Bull Ring, KTM, it's an alliance that could never be broken. But strong rumors that we'll be seeing orange bikes without Red Bull branding on going forward. And he's frozen.
Rob, yeah, I'm really struggling with the connection. Yeah, I get the gist of what you're saying. We discussed it earlier. That just blows my mind because, as I said, for I don't know how long, it's probably the better part of 15 years. If you mention motorcycling and Red Bull, KTM jumped to your mind, no matter what. It didn't matter whether it was off-road, MotoGP, Red Bull rookies, it didn't matter. KTM and Red Bull were synonymous. So if that is true, I think it's a big blow for them because we've always presumed there's a tie-in with the Red Bull and KTM factory to help finance and run the deals and keep KTM afloat, which maybe is a load of BS, which we surmised. We had no proof of that, or me personally. I just think that it would be I would almost say heartbreaking if that is true, because it's something that, if we can understand Repsol pulling out of Honda. That was always it was never it was just a sponsorship deal. People have always imagined Red Bull and KTM as being one. So I'd be very shocked if it happened. But you're saying it's coming from a pretty reliable source. So clearly we need to watch this space.
It is watch a space. As for a couple of questions, the Great 481, does this include the off-road and that too? I don't know. Oli Moto makes a very keen point here. Red Bull don't want Günther Steiner taking over Tech 3 apparently. Now we know Günther Steiner come from Formula One. Those talks of him taking over the Tech 3 team are really advanced now. Could that be a spanner in the works? I don't know. It's something to keep an eye on. Whether it is completely false or true, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I was also kind of shocked when I heard about that. So will Red Bull continue sponsoring the riders? I'm sure they'll continue the personal sponsorships with the likes of Jorge Martin and potentially Brad and a couple of other riders. But
Zarco.
Anyway, yeah, Zarco. It's just something that we're gonna have to wait and see. I'm just putting it out there as if you do see it and read about it, it's something to potentially take serious. Paul, I think that's about it for now. I think it was great to be back. Red Bull Ring. I love the circuit. I've been there. I've been fortunate enough to be there. Crowd attendance was down, which was a bit of a strange one, but I think it's because of the reintroduction of Bruno and potentially Hungary that Austrian fans maybe wanted to go somewhere different. But either way, excited for this weekend's racing. As you said, clean slate, and let's see in all the categories. I think there might be some shakeups.
Yeah, Rob, I certainly think that's, what it's going to do. It's going to, as we said, it's a level playing field, maybe a little bit less level for all the Ducati riders, as you alluded to. They've all been there. But one thing that will stand out for them, yes, they'll know the layout of the track, but the difference, no matter how much they pimp a Panigale to a MotoGP bike, night and day. But they'll have they're not going to need half of the first free practice on Friday morning just to figure out which way the track goes. They've already done that. So they've got a slight advantage, there's no doubt. I think modern social media technology, these guys will have studied that track. They know it before they'll walk it on Thursday and know exactly what to expect. So, but it'll be interesting. It'll be nice to see. We saw that Bruno. It wasn't a walk in the park for 6 Ducatis and then the rest. So I think Balloton Park is going to be exactly the same. There might be a surprise or two, and I think Moto3, Moto2 is going to be equally as competitive, and we might see one or two spanners in the works. Let's hope one is a Rushay Moodley and one is a Darren Binder. You never know.
It's the perfect way to end off the show, Paul. You couldn't have said it any better. I couldn't have said it any better myself. So thank you to everyone for tuning in. Sorry about the hassle with the Facebook channel and Paul's wife watching whatever she's been watching. But we'll definitely be back next week, Tuesday, and we'll be talking MotoGP from Balloton Park, the first time out in Hungary.
Yeah, excellent, Rob. Thanks once again. Thanks to everyone who tuned in, and I'll most certainly have my internet serviced before next Tuesday.
Cheers, Paul. Thanks, Lekker.
Thanks, Rob. Take it easy, eh? Ciao. Bye.